Hello gamers, I hope you're doing well, and yes, I finally shaved with less lumberjack and more tide parent? Yeah, I'd say tide parent. I'm not sure what we got going on here. Anyway, since the last video, I've enjoyed going down memory lane on my time in World of Warcraft, and I wanted to recount the glorious story of how work fucked me out of my dagger. Oh, Malkazian, you wonderful, corrupt-looking dagger, and you refuse to drop. As previously mentioned in my last World of Warcraft video, I got into the raiding scene around Burning Crusade, and I would be raiding with my brother. Me being my rogue and my brother being his priest. And during this time, the 10-man raid Karazhan was open to the public. Maybe because it was my first raid, maybe because I was going to spend time with my brother, but Karazhan will always hold a special place in my heart. It was one of my favourite raids to do, only being trumped by Older later on during Wrath of the Lich King. From the dinner party to the opera show battle, which would change depending what opera event you would get, the chess battle, 2 dragon fights, and books that would transform you. I loved Karazhan, and no matter how many times I saw those hallways, I was always excited and had a big grin on my face. And being the only rogue in the guild, not having to even share with a feral druid, most of the loot came my way. But out of all those runs, that dagger from Prince refused to drop. Malkazian. I don't even know if I'm saying the name right. I've used the text-to-speech option so many times to try and tell if I'm saying it right. I have no idea, so I apologize if I mispronounce it and offend some rogues in the group. Anyway, my runs were that bad that I just wasn't getting it, that I had to resort to buying a dagger from the PvP shop. And it was funny, like, I even checked later on, like, before I started recording this video, and looking at my rogue years later, I've still got that damn PvP dagger equipped. I mean, sure, I had the Emerald Ripper, but I mean, Malkazian was the one I needed to finish off the set. I mean, yeah, we were dropping Prince, Sun Fury, yeah, fucking everyone had Sun Fury, Gorehowl, yep, every warrior, every paladin, even the hunters had Gorehowl. But Malkazian for that one rogue? Nah. So week after week, month after month, clear after clear, Prince Death after Prince Death, that dagger just refused to drop for me. It became an ongoing meme of chasing a particular item that you got Welshie if you never got that one particular item that you were chasing. So outside of Azeroth in the real world, at this time I believe I was working for a contracting agency doing IT support. They would offer the IT support for other companies, providing the techs and the know-how. So at this time I would have been about 16 or 17 years old, 3 years into my full-time IT career. I'd left school at a very young age to pursue IT as a full-time career. It was a wild ride with many ups and downs. Wouldn't recommend it. Maybe I would. I don't know. I'll eventually go down into it, but for now, all you need to know is I was about 16 or 17. So the contracting agency that I was working for managed to get the contract to do IT support for a major oil and gas giant here in Australia. I'm not going to give you the name of the oil and gas giant because I don't know if their lawyers would have a problem with me telling this story. But I'll let you just pick an oil and gas giant in your head, and I'll let you assume that that's correct and you're right. For the first few months, I was on frontline support, basically being the first guy that picks up the phone and goes, "Hello IT, if you tried turning it off and on again." But being one of the few guys that actually gave a hoot about the job, eventually I was quickly promoted and moved into senior support. My brain at the time, because I was 16 or 17, was more on a trying to do extra work because I wanted to be impressive and get promoted, but more of a, I'm a kid surrounded by adults, I need to make sure that I don't look so bad, so I need to do extra. However, the truth of the matter is that in call centers, most IT technicians don't really give a shit. I was competing with nobody. These guys were there for years and really they just wanted to get their paycheck and go home. They weren't caring about the quality of their jobs or their stats or anything. Do the bare minimum, get that paycheck, get your bag and go home. So a funny thing though, it turned out that me and my brother would end up working on the same contract. Same guild, same job. I don't know if that just says to how small IT is in Australia, but yeah, me and my brother happened to be working the same job. While the job did let me work with some people that would become lifelong friends and get to work alongside my brother, the combination of terrible hours, huge staff turnarounds, questionable policies and procedures would make it one of the worst jobs that I worked in my entire IT profession. So part of the senior support role that I found myself in would be that I would be one of the technicians on what would be called the rig support, so the IT support for the oil rigs out in the ocean. The management used to throw around the line that these oil rigs would cost millions of dollars to run per day, so even a couple of minutes would be thousands of dollars that they'll be bleeding. You'd often hear them screaming out when they would go down that they're bleeding millions. I'm not too sure how much they would cost, but it was just a catchy line that they used to throw around. So what this would mean for a rig call would be no matter how small or silly the job was, it was treated with the utmost respect, as, we're bleeding millions. It also meant that the junior technicians and anyone that wasn't on the senior team would not want to touch these jobs with a 10-foot pole, merely just out of the laziness, and they had essentially a written policy get-out-of-jail-free card that they could immediately send this job your way, even if it was just something that they could easily resolve. You also had the dangling danger constantly that management would threaten to send you out to the oil rig, because, again, bleeding millions, and nothing says that I'm looking after this job than sending someone else out to the oil rig. So naturally, as I mentioned earlier, that technicians would want to do the bare minimum. That would mean that they would avoid doing these rig jobs, even if it was something simple. Even if it was something simple like Steve on one of the oil rigs just simply wanted to call to ask what the weather was like. So during this fateful week, this would be the time that we were going through a huge turnaround of staff. We'd be on to manager number 4 out of 5 managers. This manager that we had was a no fuss manager. It's a very accountant manager, not very IT savvy. His words, not mine. For the sake of the story, we'll call this manager Adam. So my brother and I, we were on the early shift together, 6 a.m. start, which meant we're up at 4 a.m. for the 1-hour journey into the city. Usually people would trickle in every 2 hours or so, eventually having the full team around 11 o'clock, which is when me and my brother would dip out for lunch. So this is where our story truly takes off. During my lunch break, we get the rig call that comes through, and from what I can only imagine is probably a state of mass panic. A technician, who we will label Lazy Technician, takes the call, and as he's answering the call, he looks towards my desk to be able to pass it on, and then notices and starts to panic as my seat is completely empty. He might have to troubleshoot it himself, but luckily Lazy Technician has done his training. He knows the procedures and policies that he can escalate it to the manager. The manager's not technical, Adam doesn't know anything about tech, so he can easily sort of Jedi hand wave the explanation away and let Adam deal with it. So Adam gets told about this emergency call. The rigs cost millions of dollars. He's reading his notes going, oh golly, we're bleeding money by the fistful here. He knows there's been a huge turnaround of staff. I'm not going to be one of them, he says to himself. I need to handle this truly. I need to show authority. Your technician has explained the issue, but you don't really understand what he's talking about. But you know you got to deal with this issue. So Adam is panicking. The sweat is pouring from his brow. He's looking left and right. But then he remembers the ace in the hole. Book your senior technician on a flight straight out to the oil rig. By golly, Adam, you've saved the day. He probably took the call himself and smugly said while smiling on the phone to the person on the oil rig, don't worry, oil rig citizen. We'll be sending our top technician out immediately on the first available flight. He will be there personally to resolve this issue. Every time I've told this story in my head, I like to think that as he's saying this to the technician or the person on the oil rig call, he's looking toward the wall where there's a picture of the CEO of the company on there. There's a single tear falling from his cheek, and he's just slowly nodding, going, I did it. After a session of patting himself on the back and telling him he's done a great job, my brother and I return from our lunch break, and immediately Adam makes a beeline right for my desk. He proceeds to start reprimanding me for not being available during a crisis call, and before I could even understand that if I meant to not have my lunch, if I meant to be predicting calls, am I meant to eat exclusively at my desk, he then hands me a set of papers which has my flight information and tells me to grab my go bag and get my ass to the airport. By this time, I'd clicked onto what had happened, and I was about to start arguing that in the time I've been there, I've never once had to fly out there. Most of the jobs were easily fixed remote jobs, and in fact about 95 to 96% of the jobs were quick and easy fixes. I even had a paper trail on the other technicians with what jobs had been escalated to me to see what sort of things that they couldn't resolve and that I had to take over, and most of it was due to laziness or incompetence. But before I could inquire any further onto the job, on who had called, and see if I could speak them on the phone to save a flight out there, Adam quickly shut that conversation down and bluntly told me that if I was not on that flight, he would find someone else that would go out on that flight, and I could spend the rest of my afternoon looking on Seek for a new job. Being 17 at the time, I didn't really have the confidence to argue with him and state my case, so I sheepishly just agreed to it, and I grabbed my go bag and left. So on the flight, my mind is racing. I mean, I'm going through every possible scenario, every problem that could possibly happen on an O-rig, and if already figure is confident enough to put money down and book a flight, it's got to be something serious. So on the flight, I've got a notepad out, and I'm going through every possible problem that I could think be happening on an oil rig that could justify me being there. Maybe they haven't got an internet connection, maybe the routers are having some problems, maybe the printers are jammed. I know that the printers were due for a servicing, so maybe they've just lost the ability to print, which on an O-rig is quite serious since they do a lot of their safety manuals and procedures printed down to say what work's being done, so that could be it. It could be the bird pooping siren system, so they had a siren system installed that would make a loud noise anytime birds would land on the platform to spook them away, because bird poop would cause a lot of damage on these platforms, so maybe that was it. So upon my arrival, as the helicopter slowly landed, the day manager, a large bearded man, greeted me on the platform. As I was greeted, he guided me through the platform, and he was cursing out technology the entire way, going down hallways, stairways. He eventually led me into a small room that they had dubbed the library. The library was a room that was basically a set of rows of desks, which had a small computer on each of them, not assigned to an individual, but was for general public use, merely allowing the staff to be able to access their emails when they weren't on the job. So then, with a straight face, he holds up a wireless keyboard and mouse, places it on the desk, and begins typing, and he looks to me and says, "Look, I type on the wireless keyboard, I use the mouse, it moves and does the text over here on this screen, right?" Right. He then holds up the same keyboard and mouse, and he walks over to a terminal on the other side of the room, placing the keyboard and mouse down in front of it, and he says, "This is wireless. I take the same keyboard and mouse, which is wireless, and wirelessly worked on that one over there." He then proceeds to start typing and moving the mouse, and he points over to the other machine, and he goes, "As you can see, it's still moving and typing on that machine over there, despite the fact it's in front of this machine." He's staring at me and he begins to yell, "It's wireless. What is the point of wireless technology if it only transmits to one device?" It then dawned on me. He is serious. This man is 100% serious. He's in charge of a multi-million-dollar oil rig doing some of the most sophisticated shit, and this is how he thinks wireless technology works. It then further dawned on me that the technician that took the call is either A, super lazy, or B, has never dealt with wireless technology and is very incompetent. 'Cause why would I be here? 'Cause he never asked about the receiver. After this realization, I calmly, without saying a word, I approached the first computer. I reached behind, feeling the USB ports till I found the receiver, unplugged the receiver, calmly and without a word, plugged it into the second machine, waited for the Windows beep of a new device, moved the keyboard and mouse, and showed that it worked. We stood there in the most uncomfortable silence that I've ever experienced before, with only the sounds of the rig breaking the silence. Eventually, I asked if the helicopter was still on the platform and if I could go home. He radioed ahead, and I was booked on a flight back on the mainland, which I'd get home just after dinner. I don't know if you've ever been in a state of shock or panic where your brain just goes completely blank. There's no voices, there's just the void. That was me the entire flight back. I don't even remember how I got home, and I just remember I got in late, and I crawled into bed, and I just collapsed. The very next day, me and my brother are on our way to the office. I'm explaining the whole thing. He's in tears of laughter, thankfully not crashing the car. I was about to start laughing with him, and then he uttered one line that broke me. You know, you're taking it really well, all things considering what dropped last night. Now, it was about 5 a.m. and my brain hadn't clicked. I mean, like, I hadn't even had my caffeine yet. So when he was referring to, like, dropped, I thought he meant that the technician who took the call had dropped the ball on there. And so I just agreed with him, not really processing what he was exactly referring to. So we arrived in the office, I cracked my Red Bull, and I signed into our guild's forum. And my brother was what we would call the chronicler. He would record everything and document everything on the forums for our guild. From healing and damage charts during raids, the number of attempts, our PvP stats, and of course loot drops from raids. And I'd always check the guild forums regularly just to see where I was stacking up against the other members of the guild. As I'm drinking my Red Bull, I'm reading through, and eventually that's when I see the Karazhan run. I'm looking through the Karazhan run, and that's when I saw it, and I clicked to what my brother meant. Prince was downed, Malkesian dropped, given to our main tank, while I was on an oil rig for a stupid job. I unleashed what can only be described as a primal scream of anger and rage. My brother realized what that scream was and began laughing hysterically. If I had any fucks to give, they were officially gone, out of stock, kaput. I was angry. I was ropeable. I was pacing that much. I think I put a hole in the carpet. I was talking to myself whether I should burn the building down or whether I should put Lego bricks in everybody's shoes. Eventually, calmness came back into my soul, and a more civilized payback was in order. That paper trail that I had. I proceeded to print that paper trail out, essentially receipts of every stupid escalation that I had had to deal with, what the job was, what the resolution was, which usually was a simple solution, and most importantly, the names of these technicians. I wanted my revenge. So I booked a meeting room, I waited for the whole team to come in, Adam came in as well, and as soon as the meeting starts, I optimized my half-an-hour window to name and shame every single one of those technicians. So my brother had a front row seat to it, and he tells me that I had the crazy eyes, that I had the tone that was just right. It was the combination of like an angry, super disappointed parent that just found a bottle of booze in their kid's wardrobe. And he looked around and he saw combinations of fear and shame and discomfort, even though I was a 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid who could not back up anything. Somehow my bluff was on point and people thought that I was literally going to start slapping and throwing people out of the building. The whole meeting was just a blur to me. It was probably the combination of caffeine and anger. I remember I ended the whole demonstration of showing how a keyboard and mouse works when using a wireless receiver, and pretty much insinuating that if I ever had to deal with something as silly as that again, that I would come back with that receiver and shove it up a place that would be very unpleasant for the technician, that would escalate that sort of job to me. So as I stormed out of the room, my brother followed behind me shortly. I could hear Adam briefing the technicians, going through the notes about proper procedure, when to escalate, for what I can imagine would have been one of the most uncomfortable meetings that he's ever been a part of. As we get to the elevator door, as soon as those doors shut, both me and my brother burst into tears of laughter. Me for finally getting this off my chest and just really calling everybody out for crap that they've been doing for years, and my brother for watching a little kid, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, who couldn't win a fight against a weighted blanket, successfully intimidate and worry a room full of fully grown adults. The number of escalations after that meeting dropped dramatically, and I only ever really dealt with jobs that were actually serious jobs. Adam would eventually shortly leave, and I would be met with a new manager who we got into many disagreements, eventually with a policy and procedure that I did not agree was good for the team, and he gave me the tried and true, well, if you don't like it, go somewhere else. So, I did. Anyway, and that's the story on how work fucked me out of my dagger. No, I'm not still bitter about it, and I can look back on it and laugh. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this sort of content, feel free to give me a follow down below and comment as well if you've ever been screwed out of loot. If you've enjoyed this sort of content, we do reviews, discussions, playthroughs of management games, simulation games, RPGs, just generally anything. We also stream regularly, and we'd love to have you there if you want to join in. Anyway, until next time, gamers, take care of yourselves. You have a great one. I still can't believe I don't have that dagger. I am so tempted to reactivate my account and go back and see if I can get that dagger.